Hey everybody, Ed Homewood, Old Guy Hi-Fi channel. I hope everyone's doing well today. Today should be a very interesting review. It's been a long time coming. Today we're going to take a look at the LAiV HP2A headphone amplifier. So sit back, relax, and we'll get started on this video. So what is the LAiV HP2A? Well, it is a $2,700 headphone amplifier slash preamplifier, and it's got some very unique features and some pretty amazing specs, which you'll see rolling over here as I talk. The key things about this is, without question, the amplifier section, preamplifier section, and the volume attenuation section. We're going to look at that when we go inside, but the basics are the Class AB amplifier output section uses 4 high bandwidth EXICON lateral MOSFETs, and we'll talk about what a lateral MOSFET is when we get inside. And it runs in a Class AB configuration, so it's actually Darlington pairs. Now, this can output up to 11.8 watts per channel into 32 ohms on the balanced output and 2.8 watts into 32 ohms on the single-ended output. Now, it supports both 4-pin XLR and 4.4 millimeter balanced outputs, as you can see on the front panel. And we're going to look at the front and the back and so forth. And it does have a 1/4-inch single-ended. Now, the MOSFETs that it uses, these EXICON lateral MOSFETs, they're very smooth, very musical. We're going to talk about that when I do my summary, but it really is interesting. So now the preamplifier section is unique, and it is a fully discrete Class A balanced buffered preamplifier, and it uses this precision matched resistor ladder volume attenuator. And again, we're going to talk more about that when we go inside, which is really interesting because a lot of switch resistor volume control attenuators have relays, and when you turn the knob, you'll hear the clicking of the relays. This doesn't do that because it actually uses what's called an optocoupler, so kind of interesting in that regard. Now, as far as expandability, and you'll see when we look at the back, it has what's called an LEXT IN2 module that you can add to this, and it's a specialized DIN connector, multi-pin connector, that you can add a phono input to it. You can add another line level. It does only have a single XLR input right now, but this gives you the option to use this as a preamplifier if you want to, and then still have a beautiful Class AB high power amplifier for your headphones. So let's do this. Let's go, we'll look at the front panel. We're going to look at the back panel. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to take you on a tour inside of this, and I think you'll be very impressed. So give me a second to reconfigure. Well, here we are looking at the front panel of the HP2A from LAiV Audio. I'm going to go ahead and power it up. Power is this button on the beveled edge here on the left side. As it's powering up, we've got a 6.3 millimeter 1/4-inch single-ended headphone jack, 4.4 millimeter balanced pentagon, and XLR, that's a menu button. Over here is the volume encoder, and again, design-wise, it's consistent with the Harmony DAC and other LAiV products as far as having that beautiful machined brass knob. And that can do a number of different functions. We'll get to that in just a second. On the display, you'll see it says -50 dB. That's the volume setting that I've got it set to start up at. You can choose whatever startup volume you want to. This display up here would show additional inputs if we had the LE link connected to it, which gives us then the ability to add line level phono, some other stuff like that. This right here, you'll see a little speaker. That is now, this is set in preamp mode. If I move it down a notch, it's preamp mode and headphone. If I move it all the way down, it is headphone only. Now, on the menu button, I'm going to come over here and touch that. It'll bring it up and it'll show display. Now I'm going to use the encoder to scroll through the various options. So on display, if I touch the encoder, push down, it lets me change the brightness, the dim, turn it off, whatever. If I push the menu button, it brings me back out. If I go down to volume, if I go down to volume and push the button, it allows me to preset a volume control -30, -40, -50 dB. And then shape, now this is an interesting thing. Go ahead and push that, and on the remote control, there is a little button here, a little slider button that has 2 different shapes on it. One, and it's a little hard, one is an up arrow, the other is a square. It's set for square. I can use this remote control for both the Harmony DAC and the HP2A just by sliding the button over to choose which device I want to use. So really, really simple, really interesting. And this unit does come with this beautiful remote control. So let's go back out here, and then obviously we can go down to About, shows your firmware update, so forth and so on. Sorry, shows your firmware update, you know, which version of firmware, and you can update it. And then we'll come back here, and then reset would take you back, sorry, clumsy. Reset would take you back and reset the unit back to its factory default should you want to. And again, you'll see the volume encoders, beautiful, smooth, wonderful stuff. So that's the front panel. Let's do this. Let's take a look at the back. Well, here we are looking at the back of the HP2A. This connector right here is called the LAiV, and it allows you to add an expansion module to give you additional inputs. Currently, it only has a single balanced input. It does have balanced out, and it does have line out. Now, it outputs both at the same time. We've got a 12-volt trigger here if we're going to use this as a preamp to drive, let's say, the GAN M amps from LAiV Audio. So again, the expansion module, balanced XLR input, balanced XLR output, single-ended output, and again, they're both live at the same time and variable. You got a grounding lugs here should you need it, and then of course your IEC power socket. So that's the back of the unit. Let's open it up and see what's inside. Well, here we are looking at the inside of the HP2A. As you can see, the casework is magnificent. This entire case, all its partitions and compartments are milled from a solid billet of aircraft-grade aluminum. Really, really high end. Now, you'll see power supply here, large power transformer, toroidal power transformer, really interesting. Now, there are 4 sections: power supply section, output amplifier section, volume attenuation section, and then preamplifier section. So let's start with the volume attenuation system. Now I'll insert some pictures of the resistors outside of the case, but it uses precision matched discrete resistor ladder volume attenuation design. Now, why is that important? Well, potentiometers can exhibit nonlinearities at the extremes of their range, and depending on the quality of the potentiometer, it can exhibit some nonlinearity in its normal operating range. Also, too, potentiometers are mechanical devices. They're little fingers scraping across a copper contact to change its resistance, and those can wear out. And we all know, vintage gear, you can get really noisy volume controls, and you got to get in there and clean them and sometimes replace them. But with a discrete resistor ladder volume attenuator, you don't have that. They're completely linear throughout their entire operating range. The other interesting thing here is in this LAiV unit, it doesn't use relays to switch from the resistors. A lot of times you'll hear volume controls that have a stepped resistor that use relays, and as you turn the volume control, it clicks. This is completely silent, really well laid out, beautiful design. Now, over here is the Class A preamplifier section. So incoming signal comes in at, let's say, from the Harmony DAC at 2 volts. The preamplifier section treats it Class A. So what the preamplifier section is doing is taking that voltage and showing it to the amplifier, and it's what's called transfer function. So the voltage here is not the voltage here. This voltage is obviously a sine wave tracking with the music frequencies, and this looks at that voltage and it mirrors that voltage, but at a much greater voltage output. So maybe we're less than 1 watt RMS here, and we're what, 12 watts, almost 12 watts RMS at 32 ohms output here. That's how all amplifiers work. It's called transfer function, and it's really important that the transistors have a really good transfer characteristic. So let's talk about these transistors. So the amplifier section uses really unique output devices. They're called EXICON MOSFETs, and it's a specialized audio grade lateral MOSFET transistor, and that's an important distinction. Now, these EXICON MOSFETs are manufactured by a company called Profusion in Great Britain, and that company is known for supplying really high quality semiconductors to both the professional audio and high-end audio world. These devices are really popular in linear audio amplification applications. So lateral MOSFET, what we're used to most of the time in most amplifiers are standard switching MOSFETs or BJTs, what are called bipolar junction transistors. Well, lateral MOSFETs have a flat and predictable transfer curve. That's the ability to take the smaller voltage from the preamp and increase it and make it a larger voltage. That's called transfer function. It simplifies biasing, which means they probably run, and I don't know for a fact, but I imagine this runs pretty fair amount of power in Class A mode anyway. They're very thermally stable. They're very easy to bias and manage that way. So it's an excellent choice for audio amplifiers. So again, these lateral MOSFETs are designed specifically for linear amplification, not switching. So back in the day when tubes were invented, a tube was known as a valve. Well, what do you do with a valve? You turn things on and off with a valve. You control the flow of things with a valve. Well, transistors replaced those as switches, high-speed switches. Well, the problem is switching MOSFETs and switching bipolar junction transistors are not particularly linear. So these EXICON MOSFETs have very smooth clipping characteristics, really good linearity, very low crossover distortion against Class AB. So part of the top part of the waveform, positive part of the waveform, is handled by one set of transistors or a complementary pair, and then the bottom half is handled by the other. And as it switches over at 0 dB, there can be what's called notch or crossover distortion. Well, with these EXICON MOSFETs, that is greatly minimized and virtually eliminated, not completely, but virtually eliminated. It's certainly not a sonic thing that you have to worry about. So EXICON, the company, Profusion, offers these in what are called complementary pairs, an N channel and a P channel, so you get a very symmetrical Class AB design. And this symmetry simplifies the circuit design and obviously increases and improves sound quality. So they're very thermally stable as well, which means you don't need a ton of heat sinking and they can be managed well. So let's talk about a comparison of the lateral MOSFET versus a typical vertical MOSFET or BJT. So in safe operating area, a lateral MOSFET has a very wide operating area. Vertical MOSFETs are narrower. BJTs are very narrow. As far as thermal stability, lateral EXICON MOSFETs have excellent thermal stability. Vertical MOSFETs are not quite as stable. They need some additional compensation. And BJTs actually need thermal tracking or gigantic heat sinks. Input capacitance, much lower on the EXICON MOSFETs. It's higher on vertical MOSFETs, and it's moderate to fair on BJTs. As far as sound character, these have a very smooth tube-like sound, where a vertical MOSFET is sharper, maybe a bit more clinical. And BJTs, while they can be punchy, they're really kind of harsher sounding, I think. So anyway, that's a look at the inside of the HP2A. As you can see, extraordinarily well engineered. So let's close this up and we'll move on with this review. Well, as you can see from looking inside, this thing is extraordinarily well constructed, and that is true of all of the LAiV products that I've had my hands on. Everything, even down to the little inexpensive micro DAC and micro DDC, extraordinarily well constructed. So the HP2A really is kind of a high-end Swiss Army knife-like audio component. I mean, it combines a fully discrete Class A preamplifier, really powerful headphone amplifier in this beautifully machined chassis, and cosmetically and design-wise, it mirrors the Harmony. And of course, on top, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little brass insets that you can stack, because it's got the 3 feet, you can stack, and it just looks beautiful together. And then of course, when they're stacked, it's the same height as the GAN-M mono amplifiers, which obviously that I have in for review. Whether you've seen it or not, I don't know. I don't always release these in a linear fashion, as it were. So anyway, let's talk about how I tested it. Well, primarily I used the LAiV Micro DDC. As you saw in the B-roll, I used the LAiV Micro DAC and I used the LAiV Harmony DAC as sources. I did use the Pegasus 2 and I did use a SPL Diamond DAC to feed this, but I wanted to try a bunch of different things. As far as the headphones go, I did use it, and you saw in the B-roll, I did use it to test the SJY Horizons, because that's a very difficult, very demanding headphone to drive. I also used it with a variety of different headphones I have here, including the FIO FT5, FT7, the FT Pros, and the Apos Audio Technica collaboration headphone. That review will be out soon. So I fed it, I used all the headphones I had in-house over I've had this for a fairly long period of time. And so I tested it on my desktop. I tested it as a preamp in the big room using the GAN-M mono amps and the LAiV Harmony kind of as a stack. And you'll see when I do the review of the amps, that, some B-roll of that all together. But as far as testing goes, that's how I tested it. So long hours, I tried it single-ended balanced. I tried it as a preamp, driving not only the LAiV GAN-M amps, but also two in a stack I've got here with a pair of Schiit G horns, and also with the Cambridge Audio MXW70 as well. So let's talk about some of the music I used while I was testing, and then we'll summarize and get out of here. Well, the first track I used is one of my favorites. It is the song Cathedral from Crosby, Stills and Nash 1977 album CSN. Now, this is a Graham Nash song, and of course, each one of them had their own kind of unique style of songwriting, and this one is definitely a Graham Nash song. It's interesting. It was inspired by a deeply personal and kind of psychedelic experience that he had when he was visiting Winchester Cathedral while doing a little LSD. Gee, rock stars doing drugs. What a surprise. So the lyrics and the narrative of the song kind of, reflect this, religious hypocrisy, mortality, maybe spiritual searching. And it uses a mix of haunting imagery and very biting social commentary. Nash, questions the role of organized religion in human suffering, and kind of expresses, kind of awe and reverence for sacred spaces, but also anger at their historic misuse, obviously. So musically, Cathedral is very atmospheric, very dramatic. It begins with a very somber organ part, gradually building into kind of a very intense crescendo. It features layered harmonies, which of course is a Crosby, Stills and Nash hallmark, their harmonies. And that's one of the reasons why I like this on headphones. Nash's leading vocal delivers a very kind of raw and urgent performance. It's very he's a bit aggressive in his performance, and the song shifts between kind of a gentle passages and very powerful, almost kind of apocalyptic sort of moments, using dynamics of the song's dynamics to kind of mirror the emotional and lyrical arc of the narrative. Really interesting. So on the track itself, we had Graham Nash's lead vocals, piano and organ, Stephen Stills on guitar and backing vocals, of course, David Crosby on backing vocals. You had Craig Dorge on keyboards, Tim Drummond, their bass player, and Ross Kunkel, their drummer that they've used for years. Now, the actual recording itself was done at the Sound Lab in Los Angeles, California in 1976, and the production was handled by Crosby, Stills and Nash were producers, and they also used Steve Gursky and Ron Albert as engineers, both very highly regarded. So the song remains really kind of a thematically complex and musical daring track in the whole CSN catalog. I think it's interesting. There's a real blending of personal revelation and kind of some grand spiritual critique, as it were. So great track. I encourage you to give it a listen. So the next track I used was this track, Dreamscape, from Alan Parsons' 1993 solo album, Try Anything Once. This is an interesting track, and it kind of continues a tradition of Alan Parsons, including instrumental tracks on his albums. You go back to iRobot and Lucifer and so forth. Really, really interesting track. It is very ethereal. It's very atmospheric. It's very cinematic in its scope. I love the way it swims around kind of in your head. It really showcases his signature blend of kind of progressive rock, ambient textures. There's orchestral arrangements in it. And again, it's an instrumental, so it's kind of semi in the middle of the track listing of the album. Most of the other tracks are vocals with lyrics and so forth, so it kind of offers a little palate cleanser, a little break between the structured vocal tracks. And I think it's fascinating, again, on headphones, because it's very lush synthesizers. There's great ambient soundscapes. There's really very subtle melodic motifs, and it evokes kind of a dreamlike, otherworldly mood, obviously consistent with the track's title. Now, the piece reflects Alan Parsons' strength in production. I mean, the guy is legendary, as you know. He worked on the final two Beatles albums when he was at Abbey Road as an engineer and as a production assistant. And of course, his work with Pink Floyd, second to none. His own catalog, second to none. It's beautiful. He has this ability to kind of layer electronic and acoustic elements to build a very immersive listening experience, hence why I like it on headphones. So while it lacks lyrics, Dreamscape communicates kind of a narrative through tone and texture and dynamic movement. So again, it kind of aligns with his longstanding tradition of including instrumental pieces on his albums that kind of, are conceptually rich and emotionally evocative, I think. It's really interesting. There were some great personnel on the album. Parsons on keyboards, Andrew Powell orchestration and conducting of the orchestral pieces, Richard Cottle on keyboards and synths, Ian Barnson on guitars, longtime collaborator, Stuart Elliott on drums, and David Patron on bass. It was recorded at Parsons' own studio in Wool Hall, a residential studio in Beckington, Somerset, England, and it was originally owned by Van Morrison, comparison, kind of an interesting thing. The album also utilized the Hit Factory in New York and Avalon Studios in California for certain overdubs, punch-ins, and mixes. It's really an interesting piece, I think. Again, it's this, you know, it's his tradition of including instrumental tracks on his albums, and I think it's just fascinating to listen to in headphones. It kind of swims around. There's some really beautiful, if you listen close, you'll pick out some of the orchestral pieces. The textures are very rich. It's a wonderful track to listen to. So the next track kind of goes back to my prog rock sort of, you know, roots back in the 70s. It is this track from Ambrosia called Nice, Nice, Very Nice. And it's off their album's 1975 album called Ambrosia. And the thing that's really interesting is the lyrics are adapted from a poem by Kurt Vonnegut. Now that poem appears in his novel Cat's Cradle, which is just an amazing novel. If you've not read it, you've gotta read it. It is fascinating. And the interesting thing is the band got Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s blessing to use the words, making this track a rare and striking fusion of progressive rock and some very interesting literary influence. Now, musically, the song blends elements of, as I mentioned, progressive rock, art rock, kind of jazz-inflected rhythms, very intricate arrangements, tight vocal harmonies, really good harmonies. It has a very upbeat tempo. There's some shifting time signatures. There's a lot of vibrant energy. Nice, nice, very nice, kind of exemplifies Ambrosia's early experimental style before they moved on to more radio-friendly songs in later albums. It was going to be part of a kind of rock opera. I don't know that it ever came to fruition, but it's fascinating. So it was all based on Cat's Cradle. So the origin of the lyrics are, it's almost verbatim from the Calypso poems of Bokonon, which is a fictional prophet in the novel Cat's Cradle. So the refrain, nice, nice, very nice, so many people in the same device, acts as a commentary on human nature and conformity. Themes that kind of resonate both in literature and music, and certainly in Cat's Cradle. Very interesting. So personnel on it were just the regular group of Ambrosia. You had David Pack on guitar and lead vocals, Christopher North on keyboard and backing vocals, Joe Puerta on bass and backing vocals, and Burley Drummond on drums, percussion, and backing vocals, because they harmonize beautifully. Now, the album was produced by Freddie Pirro and recorded at Mama Joe's recording studio in North Hollywood, California. A really interesting studio. It wasn't in business for very long. The engineering and production were enhanced because guess who was involved in this? Alan Parsons was, and I mentioned him earlier. He's everywhere in a lot of different stuff, and so his influence helped really shape and polish this album. It's sonically rich. It just beautifully produced. Just a wonderful, wonderful album. And again, you can get that sense that Alan Parsons touched this. So Nice, Nice, Very Nice remains a very cult favorite for its kind of really interesting literary roots and blend of accessible melody and progressive musical complexity. It's a really unique kind of piece, especially for 1975. Wonderful album. I remember when it came out, it was very striking, and no one could really quite figure out what was going on with it until they read Cat's Cradle, and I encourage you to do that. So, Nice, Nice, Very Nice from Ambrosia. Now, let's summarize and we'll get out of here. So the HP2A, how does it sound? It's a remarkable piece. It is absolutely remarkable, and it drove everything I put on it, especially those SJY Horizons, which was, I think, an 11 ohm load. Not an easy headphone to drive, but when given a good signal, they sound amazing, and this provides an absolutely outstanding signal. It's spacious, it's very dynamic, very natural. There's a great deal of clarity. Again, transients and dynamicism of this particular headphone amplifier are marvelous. It has so much power in reserve. Whenever it delivered a transient or any kind of dynamic peak or crescendo, it felt completely effortless. It's just like it wasn't even working. It just could deliver all the power as quickly and as smoothly and as delicately and as well detailed as the track demanded it be. Just absolutely remarkable. Now, one thing that is interesting, and I must mention this, that I think that the single-ended output, while very good, is not quite up to the balanced outputs. They're so much better. And I think it may be that difference in power, the 2.8 watts versus, 2.8 watts versus the almost 12 watts on the balanced side. I think the balanced side of it was so much better than the single-ended side. I think that's really important. And when you team it up with a really good DAC like the Harmony or the Micro DAC, or like I mentioned, I used the Pegasus. I also used the SPL Diamond DAC, which was a really good combination. This thing just absolutely shines. It will dig as deep as the track wants to go. It will provide the headphone all of the signal and all of the power that headphone needs to absolutely perform at its pinnacle of performance, its absolute peak. There are no shortcomings in this as a headphone amplifier. Now, as a preamplifier, I will qualify that statement. I did use it in combination with the Harmony DAC and the LAiV Audio GAN-M GaN-FET monoblock amplifiers. It can be, if you're into detail, this is a great preamp for that. Now, I don't have the expansion module, so I couldn't test anything with like additional line level inputs, although I did use other DACs. I couldn't test it, and the LEXT extension module also has a phono preamp built into it, and I'd love to try that as well. But as a preamp, it is extraordinarily detailed. If you're into detail and you're into resolution and into absolutely kind of a microscopic or magnifying glass look at your music, this thing delivers in spades. Now, for me, it can be just a little bit too much energy in the upper frequency, a little too much detail. You know me, I'm the smooth, warm guy. But given the right DAC, given the right headphones, this thing performed absolutely flawlessly as a headphone amplifier. Warm, detailed, all of that stuff, but as a preamp, a little more detail than warmth, but still worked really, really well. I just really enjoyed it. I give it high marks. It is, without question, as up to date, probably the best headphone. Yeah, it is the best headphone amplifier I've had a chance to review. So that is the LAiV HP2A headphone amplifier. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you'd be willing to give me a like and your subscription. That would help a lot. I'd like to thank my channel members, my subscribers, and my viewers. You guys are wonderful. You treat me so well. Thank you so much. There will be a link to the LAiV Harmony website and also to Vinshine Audio, who is the worldwide distributor. I have no affiliation with them, just links there in case you want to find out more information or find out information about purchasing the unit. There will be a title and Qobuz link to the Headphone Hi-Fi playlist in the video description. There's some other affiliate links in the video description. There is a link to the community post playlist. There's some great music there. Please check it out. Please comment. Let me know where you're at. I don't have any electrostatic headphones, and I don't think this would be an appropriate one to drive those, but any of the planar magnetics, any of the dynamics, anything I put on this sounded absolutely marvelous. It's wonderful. So comment. Let me know your thoughts about it. I think I've said everything I need to say about this. I have. Please like, subscribe, comment. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to. My name is Ed Homewood. This is the Old Guy Hi-Fi channel, and you know what I'm going to say next? It is your obligation to yourself. Please reward yourself and take an hour, put on some beautiful music, maybe listen to it on a wonderful headphone amp with a great pair of headphones, and just sit back, relax, and enjoy life. You gave me a lot of your time. I'm grateful for it. Thank you so very much. I hope you have a wonderful day.